All of time and space. Everywhere and anywhere, every star that ever was. Where do you want to start?
I got.
That's it, is it? That's your satirical impersonation of me. Thank you, dear. We're back and we're talking about The Mind Robber, which starts well but just descends into kind of made-up-on-the-spot nonsense, much like this show, really. Oh, she's coming back to be rude to me again. Got some more, have we? You've finished now, have you? In front of all my friends? Oh, for shame. I'm Ian.
And I'm Mark, and welcome to All of Time. Oh. Do you mind?
Oh, don't mind me. I've just come down to get some coffee and some chocolate.
Oh, right. Okay, well, off you pop then.
Okay.
Unbelievable.
I'm just going upstairs to read my book.
Anyway, where was I? Oh, yeah. Yes, welcome to All of Time and Space. And this time round, we have a fantastic guest for you. It is the wonderful Lee Shackelford. But before we hear from Lee, let's get to where we are in the story. To escape a catastrophic volcanic eruption, the Doctor takes the TARDIS out of space and time, and into a void he can only describe as nowhere. But the crisis is far from over, and when the time machine circuits overload, the TARDIS explodes. The Doctor, Jamie and Zoe come to in a dark, unearthly forest. There they encounter a host of characters who seem somehow familiar. A beautiful princess with long flaxen hair, a sea traveller dressed in 18th century clothes, and a white rabbit frantically consulting his pocket watch. What is happening to the three time travellers? What strange power guides their actions? In the land of fiction, who can really tell? And we'll be back after this.
Is that you, Zoe? Who's that? Who are you? Well. How do you do?
Why did the chicken cross the road?
Oh, really, I don't think this is the time for riddles.
You must answer. Why did the chicken cross the road?
Oh, very well. To get to the other side, or so I've always been led to believe. Now, would you mind telling me...
Which is correct? The yolk of an egg is white or the yolk of an egg are white?
Neither, it's yellow.
How many beans make five?
I-
Where was Moses when the lights went out?
Well,
Adam and Eve pinched me, went down to the river to bathe. Adam and Eve got drowned. Who do you think was saved?
Well, pinch me, obviously. Ah, no, stop it! Don't do that! Oh. Now it's my turn to ask you questions.
What can you make of a sword?
Huh?
What can you make of it? Rearrange it. Think. This is your last chance. S-W-O-R-D.
Yes,
Rearrange.
S-W-O-R-D, rearrange it. Well, rearranged it makes W-O-R-D-S, words. Oh. Well, it's a dictionary, words.
You have answered correctly. You may be suitable.
Suitable.
I do hope so. Come on, it's tea time. I'm hungry. Race you home.
Words.
And welcome back, and we are joined by the incredible Lee Shackelford from Discussing Who. Hello, Lee.
Hello.
How lovely of you to join us.
Oh, thank you very much. I am, as I wrote to you earlier, I'm intimidated as all get out.
Well, there's really no need.
Let's see.
There's nothing for you to fear apart from, well, Ian.
Yeah, I mean, I've got something to be very afraid of, and I call it the mind probe.
Oh, not the mind probe.
You are authorized to use the mind probe. One. What?
not the mind probe.
Yeah. So, Lee, are you familiar with our show? Are you aware of what's at stake with the mind probe?
Yes. But I'd love to hear you say it. Yeah.
Well, okay, I'll go again. So, pass the test, and you will be returned to your customary time and place. But if you fail in the challenge, my leering henchman, Castellan Cockram here, is literally frothing at the mouth to toss you into the time lash.
It's a fate worse than death.
It's a 5-episode story, so I have 5 questions. You're not expected to pass because what you don't know is that Mark got in touch with me a couple of days ago, and he said, I really want a victim, so make it hard. So I've made it very
sorry,
hard.
Lee.
So if you're ready for question 1, I shall begin. Okay, question 1. Who wrote the novel Gulliver's Travels?
My favorite author of all time, Jonathan Swift.
That's an interesting choice. Okay, that's correct. That's correct. Question 2. Who wrote the book Travels with Charlie?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, and I do know the story, but I'm blanking on the name.
The answer is John Steinbeck.
Of course.
So I'm doing one of my big shaky crosses. Question 3. Who wrote the book The Book of Charlie?
I do not know. No, that's new to me.
No, that was new to me as well. It's David Von Drell.
Is this your take on Inception, Ian? Are you just going books within books within books?
Kind of, yeah. It was. I couldn't find 5 decent questions involving the word robber. And the only mind one I could think of was Simple Minds, and I don't like them. So we're on to question 4.
But the next one will be.
Oh, yeah.
And the answer to that one will be Daniel Keyes.
Oh, if only. If only. Would that it were. Question 4.
Oh, well.
Who wrote the novel The Book of Laughter and Forgetting?
Oh. Nope, never heard of it.
Oh, that was Milan Kundera. That was a classic from, I want to say, the late 70s. I've hijacked the show. It's now a sort of general free-form books podcast. Final question. Who wrote the novel The Book of Dave?
Jonathan Swift.
It is a satirist, but it's the very erudite Will Self.
Oh dear.
Yeah, there you go.
So you have scored 1 out of 5, and Mark is going to get his wicked way with you.
Oh, Lee, I'm so sorry. But we'll save that to the end because we don't, we've still got a story to talk about here. So let's put it off for a bit longer. And let's talk about the mind robber.
I'll play Toby Haydock's excuse. He says, I only know about Doctor Who.
It's fair enough.
Lee, just for anyone who's not familiar with your work, where do you come into the whole Doctor Who thing? Are you an old school fan from the PBS days, or are you coming at it from the new series and looking back at it?
Oh, PBS indeed. In the late 70s, and the first thing I ever saw was Genesis of the Daleks.
Ooh, good one to come in on.
Yeah. And I was on board immediately. And in fact, when Sarah fell off that gantry, I really, my heart stopped. I just thought, I can't wait to find out what happens next. Is she going to be okay? So, yeah, and I've been on board ever since. And, in those days, at least our PBS affiliate, they really were kind of hunkered down on Tom Baker.
Mm-hmm.
So we would get to Legopolis, and then we would start over with Robot.
Oh, wow.
So it was years before I saw who that white-haired fellow was in Robot.
And who that blonde guy was at the end of Legopolis.
Who's the blonde chappie? Yeah. It took a long time, but you know, I think this is an interesting story, or I wouldn't labor you with it. But my introduction to Doctor Who actually was in the pages of Famous Monsters of Filmland.
Oh.
And Fari Ackerman did a piece about this cute show that you'll only see if you're in the UK. So I'm going to tell all the Americans about it. And it featured a picture of something that immediately caught my eye because I'm fascinated by all things that are perfect miniatures or really large on a perfect dimensional scale.
Okay.
So connecting us back to Swift and Gulliver again.
Mm-hmm.
But the picture was of a handsome young man and a beautiful young woman being confronted by a gigantic ant.
Oh.
And I said, this is for me. And I went on reading the article, which was a little vague on the details, actually. But I knew, and this shows that I was raised on American television, I knew that handsome young man in the picture must be Doctor Who.
Ah. You were in for a bit of a surprise then.
Yes, I was. Because the article did go on to say that his face changes from time to time.
Okay.
But I think chronologically, if I'm remembering right, that would have only happened twice at this point. So he didn't make a big deal of that. You know, if the article were written now, you would certainly want to kind of lead with that. But anyway, I kept that picture, and William Russell, bless him, came to Gallifrey one year, and I had him autograph that photo, and I told him the whole story. But anyway, so I did finally get Ian's autograph on that picture of
fantastic.
Ian, which and so now my I'm trying to get in the same room with Carol Ann Ford and the ant, and then I'll have all of the autographs of that picture. But yeah, as you can imagine, when I finally saw Planet of the Giants, I was delighted because it's our heroes get to be Lilliputians.
Yeah, yeah.
What fun that is.
So how long was it before you actually got to see a Troughton story?
My goodness, it may have been certainly in the 90s.
Okay.
And then many of us were by that time acquiring them on the internet through other means, as I always like to say. And then I was just collecting everything that that we could lay our hands on,
Mm-hmm.
which of course with the Second Doctor is sadly not a lot.
No, certainly not back in the 90s at least. We're slightly better off these days, but...
yes, slightly. But we do have all of the Mind Robbers, so that's...
Yes, we do. Which takes us wonderfully back to the subject of the episode. You're such a pro. So, I guess, this have been one of those files that you came across, or did you? I'm not sure. I know the books did make their way to the States, but I don't know quite how common they were over there. Were you aware of the novelizations, or was that not something that you?
Yes, no, I bought. I remember that. I want to say in the late 70s, I bought the novelization of the Talons of Wing Chang.
Okay.
And Brain of Morbius, which is my favorite serial. And so I still have those. I'm looking at them right now.
Mm.
Never read The Mind Robber.
So this story, it's you could argue that last season 5, it does kind of fall into something of a familiar trope, the whole base under siege thing. Whereas this season, we're only 2 stories in, but it seems like they've just completely written that off. It's just they're going completely. I mean, what are we now? 1968 going into 69?
68.
Yeah, so, I guess things are getting a bit more groovy and out there. But this is like some sort of weird fever dream.
And it's... I didn't really understand this until very recently because we have so little of Celestial Toymaker, but it's the Celestial Toymaker.
I think we made that point.
Or really, what I think is that
Toymaker episode. I think it could easily have been a rematch with the Celestial Toymaker, but I'm guessing somebody would have had to have been paid some money for that. So I'm assuming that's the reason why it's the Master and not.
I do imagine sort of a room full of writers in the American TV way of saying, you know, it was a great story, Celestial Toymaker. Let's do that again. Well, there was a lot of problems with Celestial Toymaker. Right. So this time, let's do this instead, right? Let's make sure that the games you're playing have actual stakes. Let's make sure that the Doctor is visible on screen throughout the whole thing. Let's. And so I feel like they fixed a lot of the mistakes. If we're going to do Celestial Toymaker again, it's much stronger, isn't it? It feels like things are more properly motivated.
Yeah.
Things just make more sense.
I mean, Celestial Toymaker was a very troubled production, but I think this starts off in a similar fashion because the previous story they just felt couldn't really make its way to the full episode length, so they took an episode from that and then added an extra one onto this story, so they had to come up with a whole new episode 1, which is a really iconic episode, but yeah, it's quite a task to throw at someone in very short notice. I mean, the turnaround recording was absolutely insane at this point. I think they were recording a couple of weeks in advance of transmission, which seems just completely mad to me.
No, it could only be worse if they were doing it live.
It's no wonder Troughton was so exhausted. I think this is the story where he really lost his temper about them being worked so hard, because obviously the first episode is purely the 3 main leads because they've got no money to create an extra episode, so they have to use the existing sets, they have to use their main cast, and I think they were feeling pretty hard done by because they were being made to do all the heavy lifting in that first episode, and I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Ian, you've been remarkably quiet there.
I have. I don't want to sound like a contrarian, but I'm going to just roll out. I'm going to roll out my thesis right now. I think part 1 is a fairly flimsy and disposable bit of piffle, but it is perfect for kind of playground reenactment if you're a kid. All that happens is all that happens when you play Doctor Who in the playground. You run away from the TARDIS, you're captured by an alien, you run back to the TARDIS. It's that level of childishness.
It is padding, isn't it?
It's driven entirely by Zoe suddenly being pig-headed for no good reason and kind of without precedent, but she refuses to listen to the Doctor or Jamie. It's 25 minutes of a little going a long way, and yet ironically, that closing shot of them on the console,
so iconic, isn't it?
Is one of the most amazing visuals of the 60s. So
now, Ian, are we? I don't want to bring it down into the gutter here, but are we going to talk? Referring to here?
Oh, I'm not talking about Zoe's buttocks.
Although it is a beautiful,
you've put them in my head now.
Catsuit,
It's a wonderful bit of space clothing. We're lucky that Jamie didn't have to wear it as well.
I'm glad he wasn't spinning around on that console, because if he's a genuine Scot, that could be.
He's up there too. I know Fraser likes to say that he did have a strong cult following.
So the story starts.
But they blow the freaking TARDIS up. It's
crazy.
I mean, it's hard to
What did you think the first time you saw that? Did it blow your mind as well as the TARDIS? Or were you a hardened fan by this point, and you obviously knew that it was all going to be fine by the end?
I always trust that it's going to be okay, especially where the TARDIS is concerned.
Yeah, it's a trope that happens a few more times.
But it's still, yes, and sometimes more spectacularly. But this does, I think, interesting. In watching it again, I was thinking about things that have been done in the 2005 series, that this sort of canonizes the idea that the control console is capable of independent travel.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? Or is this all in the Master's mind? I mean, in the story
Well,
world.
it's hard to really pin it down as to what's real and what's not, but I mean, without wishing to get too far ahead, in the next season, the console does seem to have this ability to be outside of the TARDIS quite a lot.
True.
I want to know how they got it through the doors.
Yeah, I was wondering that too. Maybe they have the little gadget that Meglos has.
You can see Pertwee with a screwdriver taking the doors off the police box. They're just another inch. Super Ted.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure that's how it happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it is, a very interpretational kind of episode. You can make of it what you will. You can make what sense of it you will. We all know that because it's the land of fiction, and there's no reality, that anything can happen. The biggest problem is that the Doctor knows that from episode 1, and there is never any sense of peril about the whole thing.
I think from a production standpoint as well, just remembering back to the chase, do you remember there was talk of the Verity Lambert being not too keen on them using other people's intellectual property for stories because it kind of lessens the drama, but they seem to have approached it from a different angle for this one. Do you feel that worked?
I do. I really, in all sci-fi franchises, and I'm thinking of the original Star Trek series in particular, anytime that out of sheer poverty we have to say, oh, we're in the Old West, see, on a bare stage, or now we're suddenly in the land of make believe. It just wearies me because it just seems like it betrays its poverty. But of all the different shows that have done that, I think Mind Robber works the best. That's probably damning with faint praise.
Well, that's why we're here.
But, or maybe I just like it. To damn with faint praise is the mission statement. And maybe I just like it because it has Gulliver
played
in
by
it,
Bernard Horsfall, first of many appearances.
Exactly. And just one of my favorite people all around.
Do you think they purposely picked the tallest actor they could find to make Patrick Troughton look even smaller? He's really towering over him, isn't he?
I noticed the director can't resist getting him in the same shot like that.
And little Wendy Padbury as well.
I think so. Right? Yes. She looks like he could pick her up and put her in his pocket. So.
What accent do we think Bernard Horsfall was going for with this performance?
Well, the character is from Nottingham, but it didn't strike me as particularly Nottinghamshire. But
because like Gulliver himself, it travelled around a lot and took in a number of interesting locations. There was a hint of Wales, there was a hint of the West Country, there was some Pakistan, but I'm not sure I was ever really picking up a Nottingham vibe.
I think he's like a very early Jason Statham. I don't know if you've seen the film The Meg, but his accent is all over the place in that film. I'm not sure if he's supposed to be a Cockney wide boy or an American or what. I don't know. But, yes, it's it's just helping to add to that sort of atmosphere of weirdness, isn't it? I'm being charitable now.
Oh. And world travel.
Exactly, yeah. You pick up these things, don't you?
Because I am a huge fan of Gulliver and of Jonathan Swift generally, I was delighted that, of course, he's actually speaking a little bit of Lilliputian and Brobdingnagian at the beginning, but then he explains what he meant, and those are not what those words mean, according to Swift. So, there was the Swift fan of me said, yay!
So upon first watch of this, did you know straight away that it was Gulliver then because of that use of the language? Yeah.
Yes, it's an adroit piece of the writing, I think, because I just think that's lovely. That immediately he says something that if you know the book well, you go, oh, this is Gulliver.
Well, they can only use the words that are written in the text of the worlds they come from, which I think is quite a neat idea.
It is. And a real challenge for the writer. I think, if I were the writer doing this, I would probably get halfway through the serial and then realize I've really, I'm regretting that. Can I go back to episode 1?
I suppose that's one of the bonuses of having a fictional character from the future. So you're not restricted by that. What do we make of the Karkus? We might as well talk about this particular elephant in the room.
Mark, I've just written down a lot of bad words.
I want some.
No, Ian.
I have. I'll read them out because I'm not worried about getting a family-friendly rating. But in fact, you know what? I won't. I'm going to keep it clean. So I've put that it was a really poor performance with feeble fight scenes. Comic strip character from the year 2000. Chuff off. That's what I wrote down.
Wow. But Wendy Padbury kicked his ass, so that was quite impressive. Did you not think?
Very Emma Peel.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Ian hasn't watched much of the Avengers, have you, Ian?
I haven't watched. I've seen one episode and one movie from the 90s. That's my Avengers.
Don't judge it by the movie. But...
Yes, less said about that, the better. But yeah, if you like Wendy Padbury's catsuit, then you need to see.
I think we might have to have a little spin-off episode at some point with some Avengers episodes, because there's an awful lot of Doctor Who actors that make their way into that show,
including Bernard Horsfall.
Yes, indeed. So, the big bad in this one, the Master, but not that one. What did we think of this gentleman? Did you like his little horns on his little hat?
Is this the first time that we've had, I think, what would become a trope of someone who is an innocent but is being... No, of course it isn't. Never mind. I withdraw the question. Being controlled by, and then I started to say great intelligence. Okay. Of course not. But it does. This is one of the things that makes Doctor Who, isn't it? That there are people who are doing awful things, and then in the end we have to acknowledge that they...
Yeah, you do feel slightly sympathetic towards the Master for a while, but then you see what he's prepared to do to stitch up the Doctor, and he certainly deserves his comeuppance.
I think the actor did a great job. I'm not sure that Peterling did a great job with the script writing here, because Gulliver rocks up in episode 2 and says, "Oh, I work for the Master," and then you know who the baddie is. The Doctor already knows they're outside reality, and the whole thing drifts along with absolutely no sense of peril. And the one payoff that can rescue the situation is finding out who the Master works for. Just turn over the... No, got nothing. Got nothing written down for that. That is an open question.
Yep.
I think this might be one of those stories that you can just sort of stick on and enjoy it for what it is. It's not necessarily going to be as earth-shattering as some of the other stories in this season. But I think there's enough about it. I personally felt watching it again for this, my attention was held. I wasn't, drifting off and looking at my phone or anything. I found it good enough that I could sit and enjoy it for what it was.
Well, I think that's the nature of the way it was written. I mean, if you are just sewing together a bunch of set pieces, then it really can't be anything other than exciting and engaging. You haven't got to explain any tedious, intricate plotting. You're just going from one confrontation or one location to another, and it's got to create a kind of, exciting momentum, at the very least.
That's the contract with the audience.
Did you have any kind of standout moments that you felt were particularly high points of the story?
I like everything that has to do with Rapunzel. Just because if we're going to go along with the silliness of what's happening here, then that is so over the top that for some reason that just makes me laugh out loud. Or I don't know, or is it double entendre that I'm enjoying because there's something about, can we climb up your hair? Why not? Everyone else does. What?
And
what are we talking
is
about
it just
here?
me, or can I just imagine young Mr. Hines chatting her up after the filming has finished?
He
There's
would
chemistry
definitely
there.
climb
Yes,
up, wouldn't
yes.
I think
You have to fight off Patrick Troughton first.
he absolutely would. They could race each other. She had two. Yeah.
When I say run.
I would say my best moment of this, and obviously I've said that the end of episode 1 is pretty jaw-dropping and iconic the first time you watch it, but also I really loved the conclusion of episode 4, where you have Jamie and Zoe being sort of trapped inside a giant and closing book, which was a lovely visual metaphor for what was happening to them. They were becoming fiction. I thought that was the good bit.
I have to say, I think the alternate Jamie showing up, obviously there was a real world version which Lee alluded to earlier, that Fraser Hines got chickenpox, so he was isolated at home. So at the very last minute they got a new actor in, and I thought he did a really great job. To the point where Wendy Padbury said, I kind of wish they'd kept him on, and Fraser didn't come back.
Did they not get on? Really?
I think she might have said that with a wry smile.
A wry smile. Good.
Well, we know from previous that Fraser Hines and Patrick Troughton were very keen on teasing their female co-stars.
Yes. Oh dear.
So I don't think she would have missed an opportunity to get one back on him.
So I did like Hamish Wilson and what they did, you know, to sort of paper over the crack of Fraser Hines not being around for episode 2 or 3 or whatever it was. That wig, though. I mean,
It's the
otherwise,
land of fiction, Ian.
it's it's not the land of early 1970s hairstyles.
Yes, it's the land of
and
good
also
fiction.
we have another example of the Doctor who is supposed to be incredibly intelligent, and he can't even identify 4 elements of his best friend's face.
Yeah.
Well, now
Okay.
I had another view on that. I always like these reminders that he is not one of us.
Okay.
And that sometimes the Doctor sort of seems to forget how human beings think or relate to one another, or even what our social standards are, or things like that. And what it made me think of was years later when the 4th Doctor will say to Catherine von Schell, for God's sake, "You're a very beautiful
I like
woman."
Peter
Probably.
Capaldi when he's talking to Clara and he's saying, "Oh, what are you? 50?"
Yeah, exactly. But I think that if you maybe for a Gallifreyan, if you look at the components of our face and of human faces and take them out of context, then maybe you really can't quite put them back together. He has Zoe's help the second time. I don't know. I actually don't buy that for a second, but that's my attempt at an explanation.
I did also think of that 4th Doctor quote when I was trying to rationalise this. So, yes, there is that charming idea that really all humans are kind of beneath him, so he doesn't bother learning faces. But it was, it was a much better, because they could have just had Hamish Wilson playing Jamie without any kind of comedy explanation for why he looked different. They could have just dropped him in and said, "Yeah, off you go." No one will notice, but they're only going to watch it once on a really small TV with really bad definition. They won't know. So we were lucky, I suppose, that they went to some sort of trouble to give it a grounding in the narrative. Cyrano de Bergerac looked a bit like Timothy Dalton, I thought. I'm not sure.
Wow, that's really harsh on Timothy Dalton.
Well,
Jeez.
apart from the nose, obviously, I'm assuming it was a stock nose.
Yeah.
Episode 5 came in at, I believe, 17 minutes.
Yeah.
Was there some sort of production reason
Yes,
why
17 or 18.
a third of the episode disappeared? Or
I'm not sure. I think it's probably just a general lack of money.
So, I mean...
That's usually my go-to excuse.
Yeah, I mean, so this is my basic problem. I think Peterling was obviously writing a semi-autobiographical story. I'm not saying for a second that the creator of Crossroads was actually taken to a different dimension and made to write stories. But he was saying, this is the life of someone who is paid to churn out fiction. You're a slave. You're using everything you can think of, every influence, every reference. And he told that story through the use, as I've said, of just any old set pieces that he could think of. And it still came in, episode 1 was written by someone else, episode 5 wasn't long enough. It felt hit and miss, and I'm being generous when I say hit.
Lee, are you aware of Crossroads?
No.
Well, it was a long-running soap opera in the UK. And it was renowned for having very wobbly sets, and it was sent up something chronically by Victoria Wood.
That's what I heard.
And they had this spoof called Acorn Antiques, and it would have various people missing their cues and really shockingly bad. But it had a real sort of cult status, and I think they've just recently released a box set of some crazy amount, like 100-disc box set of all of Crossroads. But it did have a very memorable theme tune, Ian. That's probably the only thing I can really say about it. That was
yes. It's. I mean, I don't believe I ever watched it, and yet I remember Benny and his natty little green hat. Yeah. So I must have, it must have been on in the house on occasion.
And of course, Russell T Davies wrote a biopic about the main star of that show.
Well, that's exactly what you'd expect him to do, isn't it? Because we normally ask this at the start, but let's throw it in now. When did everyone first see the story?
I think for me it would have been on UK Gold, the British satellite broadcaster. They had a run of all of classic Who that was available, so I think it would have been on that back in the 90s.
Because it was repeated on BBC Two in about either 91 or 92, 93, something like that.
Maybe it was then.
Yeah, I think that
was
was my first.
Yeah, the memory cheats, as someone famously said.
Oh, I've forgotten who that was. There's an irony.
All right.
What about you, Lee?
Whenever I acquired this pile of AVI files.
And how old would you have been, roughly, at that point?
Oh, no more than 75, 80 at that time. No, let me do the math. I would have been 45, 50.
Oh, wow.
And by that time, I had seen the the photo out of context of Wendy Padbury on the control panel many places. And so I think I was kind of under the impression that was something that was done for a lark. or the kind of thing you get talked into doing when they're saying we need a publicity photo and we're trying to bring in the dads. And, But yeah, so finally I saw the end of that episode and said, that's where that comes from. Okay. I always wondered why Jamie was up there.
I think it's the sort of story that would probably really blow you away if you were a small child when you first saw it, and specifically and particularly a small child of a much earlier generation, because I think all these references like Gulliver and the Minotaur and the Medusa and Rapunzel, it feels like it would have been quite badly dated at the time. Kids would be like, this isn't our cultural zeitgeist.
Well, I mean, we're kids of the 80s and we had Clash of the Titans.
Yes, that's very true. And I think this would make an absolutely amazing 45-minute episode now, if they replace the Karkus with a credible cartoon comic book character, Judge Dredd or Batman or someone.
Right.
Get rid of Gulliver, put some up. Have Michael Palin. He's a he's a global traveller, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And also, there's about enough story for 45 minutes. So again, I think that would work really well. But again, because we were all, I guess, you know, I was like, I don't know, 15, 16 or whatever. Maybe we all just came to it a little bit too late.
Maybe so. Because I had the same thought. What do kids in 1968, what did they think of this? Did they want to run out and read Cyrano de Bergerac and the Three Musketeers and Blackbeard and Lancelot, you know, read Mort d'Arthur as a result of seeing those quick clashes? You know, I want to know more about those guys. You know,
I mean, that might have been the intention.
Or had they already? Yes. Yeah.
Sadly, there was no Karkus spin-off series, which is a shame.
Not even Big Finish have done that. Shit! Every time you do that,
I'm gonna say
set pops into existence. It's like yeah,
exactly.
It's like the Candyman.
It's like saying you don't believe in fairies. You know? It's like.
Right. Sorry, I'm making a note about my Karkus story that I'm going to pitch to Big Finish.
Yeah, he gnashes his teeth and then fights in a very poor fashion until a young woman in a sparkly catsuit kicks his ass.
Yes.
I would watch this. Yeah.
That's right. Just that. Well, he also has a disintegrator gun, which you'll notice
Not
didn't
noticeably,
disintegrate.
no.
Anything.
But I think at one point one of the buttons fell off.
Oh no! They sort of
Disintegrated
fell off.
itself. Quite effectively.
That just made me think of
very narrow beam.
Just the 24th and a half century. He's got a disintegrator gun and it disintegrates.
Oh, that's right.
Now that was a quality episode. I did enjoy, just thinking back to sort of moments that I really liked, the scene where she that goes through the castle door and she has to fall down and there's obviously no steps there. So she does this really over-the-top sort of fall forward and a big scream, which I found hilarious.
You make do. You do what you can.
Yeah.
The what is the master's? We do hear his real name, don't we?
We do. I can't remember what it was now. Wasn't it Captain Jack Harkaway or something?
That's the character he's created and has been made to write for years and years. But yes, I might, you know, as a modern viewer watching this again, you know, I kind of sat up when he said Captain Jack Hark.
Yeah.
And I said, "You what?" Harkaway.
I think if it had been that Captain Jack, it would have been a very different story.
Yes.
I'm not sure it would have gone out before the watershed.
Oh, the doctor would have said, "You're a very naughty man. If you're the creator, yes, you ought to be ashamed of yourself." That disappointing last scene, which, you know, I agree. It just seems like we ran out of money and we ran out of time, even though we're at minute 18 of this episode. It would have been grand to be back in the TARDIS interior, which we know still exists. It doesn't.
Yeah.
That whole first episode shows that it doesn't cost any money to go in there. So, yeah, we could have at least tied things up a little bit, but instead we're just told, well, maybe we're going to Oblivion and maybe we're not. The end. Which, in other stories that I know, when we're about to all get blown up or not, you end up at the restaurant at the end of the universe.
Now, that would have been a great next story.
There were some nice visual touches. I liked the whole idea of everything going white. So you have Jamie and Zoe dressed in white, and the TARDIS is painted white, and which brings us to Goldie the Wonder Horse.
Yes.
Our wonderful unicorn. So the backstory is that they requested a horse that could do tricks and things. They wanted a white one, but the only one they could get was a Palomino, so they had to use all of their white makeup, which only did about half the horse, so they had to borrow some substance from the RAF, of all people.
I read that, yeah.
Yeah. And apparently his first take was absolutely perfect, but they forgot to load any film into the camera. So he had to go again, and by which point he was getting a bit frisky because apparently he'd sensed that there were some lady horses quite nearby that he'd really like to go.
Where would there have been a bunch of other horses knocking around?
Well, they filmed it in a I think it was like a disused
Oh right, and in the
aircraft
next
hangar
hanger along, they were
was,
filming
I think
Robin
they
Hood,
were.
were they? Is that what's going on here? Okay.
Ben Hur.
So
Yeah, the
when
Wonder
when I first saw this, it was very recent after the end of Twin Peaks, and one of the big kind of icons in that is the white horse kind of spectrally appearing in various locations. And I suppose at the time I would have, obviously it's not a link or a reference at all. The two worlds do not clash, but
They do if you're Lawrence
it was
Miles.
nice to see something like that used again. Oh well, I'm not, so yeah. But it was good. The forest made up of letters was a brilliant idea. It was vaguely well done.
Love that.
The animation of the Medusa was ambitious. I think visually and creatively, the people behind the scenes really pulled out all the stops with this one, and it's a real shame for me that the writing and the money just let it all down, I think.
I think there are lots of neat ideas, but I don't think there's an awful lot of story there.
45 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Say a word about that unicorn, by the way. I mean, my family, my mother's side are McDonald's, so we came here from Scotland.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's enough, I've grown up with enough knowledge of the North Country that I was shocked, that Jamie has to explain what he's seen. He saw a white horse with a great horn on its head. He knows what a unicorn is.
Wow.
It's the national animal of Scotland.
I know, but he's
And
a bit
it
of a dimbo,
was-
isn't he? So
But it's national pride, man. I mean, but it did make me wonder. Was that something well known and thought about and talked about in Scottish lore back in his day? And it
I like the
certainly
bit where he called
was.
Zoe a wee McClarty. I'd never heard that word, so I was very excited to use it on my wife, and she hit me.
oh,
She did.
Did she give you a
Yes.
She doesn't
Yeah,
stand for that
quite
kind
rightly.
of nonsense.
slap? No.
A bully for her.
Well, unless we've got anything else that we really want to get off our chest, I think maybe we should wrap it up and give it a score. Okay, I'm going to come to Lee first. Lee, what would you like to give The Mind Robber out of 10?
I have to give it a 7.
Okay.
And we know that the problem is that it's one of those episodes that's being created out of necessity.
Yeah.
And it shows it. It hurts. It is just too bad. It's because there are top-notch performances in it. Had they been given the time and the texture to really explore some of those things, it could have been so much better. So.
Okay. I am gonna give this one a 7 as well. I think it's above average. I thoroughly enjoyed watching it, but yeah, the story is thin. So as much as I enjoy it, I'm going to keep my powder dry because I have the distinct impression there will be stories later in the season that I feel might be somewhat more worthy of a higher score. Ian.
Yeah. So I'm going to give this one a very generous 6 out of 10. As I've said, I think in terms of the production, in terms of the set design, most of the casting, it was really good. But I do think it was an exceptionally lazy idea, and quite poorly written. Can I just check? Is Peter Ling still alive, or is he? Because I don't want him to come around here and duff me up. Don't say where I live.
Okay.
I'm still in the UK, Peter. Come and find me.
Yeah.
He may be of such an age that you can take him.
That's a good point.
So that's what we thought of The Mind Robber. Let's have some listener feedback.
I've got mail.
All right, so let's have some feedback and see what you guys think about this story. So first of all, for me on Twitter, we have heard from the Doctor Who show. G'day! This will be Rob Irwin. A story that sticks in the memory, not through being a faultless piece of television, but because of the fact it's pushing the boat out repeatedly. And it's really quirky and makes you think, this must be what all weird 60s TV was like. It's not something you easily forget. Thank you, Rob. Next up, we've heard from Homer. And Homer says, I genuinely don't like it. Like some kind of fever dream, and not in a good way. I know I'm out of line with most people, but it's really not my cup of tea. So, it's 1 for and 1 against. Next up, we have heard from DJ Alpha T. Hello, DJ Alpha T. And they say, a really unusual beast. A last-minute, no-budget episode that produces something eerie and magical, followed by 4 episodes of brilliantly cast sheer fun. Innovative and imaginatively directed. One of the highlights of 60s Who. So, he's a big fan. Next up, we've heard from Dave Jarvu. And Dave says, magical, fantasy and escapism. I didn't know what to expect taping it in 92 after a 4-year break from being a fan, and it lured me back in full time. A palate cleanser after season 24 and 25, episode 1 a testament to what a good script editor can do with 0 budget and 25 minutes to film. And next up we've heard from Joe Llewellyn. And Joe says, one of the first classic DVDs I bought. First classic story I showed my children. They loved it. Called it the one with the snakes because of Medusa. My favourite classic trio. So much fun. Imaginative, clever, great imagery. Like the towering Gulliver with the much shorter crew. Yes, we mentioned that earlier, yeah.
There you go.
And next up we've heard from Kieran Evans. And Kieran says, absolutely bonkers and I love it. A welcome change from the Base Under Siege stories of Season 5 and shows great innovation from the crew to give such a wacky, creepy story, which is my second favourite Troughton. And to think I know one set of YouTube reactors who thought it didn't go far enough. Ooh, I don't know who they're referring to. I tend to avoid YouTube if I can help it. That way madness lies. Yeah, we didn't really mention it when we were chatting earlier. There are a few quite creepy moments. The bit where all the kids are sort of looking into the glass tank and laughing, that was a bit creepy. Next up, we've heard from Tony times 2. And Tony says, it can be sinister, mysterious and playful by degrees. For me, it's heightened by the boldness of adding an extra episode and recasting Jamie rather than have him absent for a few episodes. I'm particularly fond of the set, creativity and having a future fictional character. As much as it perhaps wasn't our favourite so far, I think they did a good job of putting it together based on what they had. And next up we've heard from Rob Moss. And Rob is very short and sweet on this. He says, massively overrated.
Yay!
Okay, so he's definitely not a fan. Well, you know, we're a broad church. So
good to hear a genuine Karkus fan in there too.
Absolutely, yeah. So next up we have some audio from the genius that is Andy Moore. Well, yes, it's another musical masterpiece from Andy. I was going to say very one note, but he's played lots of notes in that one. But yes, he's focused on one specific aspect.
That's like
of the story.
the music I hear in my head all the time. It's like the soundtrack to my day-to-day existence.
Oh my good lord!
Yeah. You may be a renegade Time Lord.
Oh, if only.
That's just
so much
drums.
the sound of drums.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see.
Ian, who have you heard from?
Oh, well, I've heard from all my favourites. First off, Suki Kirk says, love the first episode of this with its claustrophobic yet expansive sets. The rest of the story is then just a solid runaround with a rushed ending. I also love the way that this story was being recorded at the time Fraser Hines caught chickenpox and could be replaced by Hamish Wilson without viewers thinking that this doesn't make sense. Philip Edney from the Sirens of Audio says The Mind Robber was the first Patrick Troughton story to be repeated in Australia while I was alive. It was 1986. I was so excited I made my parents go and buy a VHS recorder the day episode 1 screened.
Good Lord.
The show was... I know. The show was so much better than I'd imagined, and I watched the show dozens of times. Episode 1 was amazing and so well acted. Eh? And one of the best cliffhangers ever. I'll agree with that. You had both the TARDIS blowing up and Wendy Padbury's bum. Could it get any better? I mean, two ways, but you know. Each episode has amazing moments, and I still love the change of face of Jamie. What other show could pull off an actor? Eh? Oh, what other show could pull off an actor change mid-story so easily? The stock music in episode 5 still makes me laugh, as does the whole mind battle scene. A true masterpiece that bears rewatch after rewatch. So I would say that's a fairly strong vote in favour of the story.
I would agree.
Then we've heard from the beautiful and sublime Joe Ford, who says the story is subversive, chilling, silly, literate and imaginative. It's one of the best Doctor Who stories for the massive nuts it flashes. Now that's presumably when
again,
Fraser Hines falls over. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe.
26 glorious years. Say, just finished this as part of the grand rewatch, and it's every bit as engaging as when I first viewed the VHS back in 1990. Tightly directed by David Maloney, making the most of the superb set design. I hear ya. Lighting and soundscape. The regulars were on top form too. Adored every minute. Fifthly, we've heard from Anthony Forth, who says the first episode is a claustrophobic adult nightmare, followed by 4 episodes of tiresome children's hour whimsy. Anthony, I'm getting the beers in. 1 great episode, then 3 weak ones, and 1 that was okay. So that's a very forensic kind of episode by episode exploration there. I like that. Deb Jones says one of my go-to stories for people who are unfamiliar with Doctor Who. Peter Ling leaps to mind. Dave Kitchen. Peterling. Do excuse me, everyone. I've been Peterling in the corner. Dave Kitchen says, such fond memories of this opening the 1986 season of repeats on the ABC. Watching a black and white story seemed exciting and exotic to my young mind. I love it. Part 1 is creative, and from there it's fun. No, I've read the wrong word there. Part 1 is wonderful, and from there it's fun, creative and entertaining. Without being showy, the whole thing just works so well. Classic. And finally, I have the following missive from Enormous Space Octopus, who says, it's the kind of story I wish Doctor Who did a bit more often. Not all the time, you wouldn't want a whole series of it, although, now I think about it. But the dreamlike quality and non-stop surprises are really refreshing and keep the show exciting. Also, it led to some brilliant Steve Lyons novels using the land of fiction. Yeah, see, I was going to mention Conundrum, but I thought better to keep my 2 podcasts separate.
You don't want to.
Yeah,
could have the Blinovich limitation effect.
Absolutely. Yeah. So they were my lovely guys. Thanks for writing in, everyone. You're awesome. Thank you.
Lee, who have you heard from?
The show has heard from Richard Smith, who observes that Troughton gets to use his one silly voice again. I presume he means, oh no, oh. The ending is all a bit Star Trek. or maybe brains of Morphatron, but let's just smash everything up and run away.
Yeah.
Maybe he's never seen a James Bond movie. But as an entirely new conceit, it's interesting. Just a shame that ultimately there isn't an elegant resolution. Yes, like telling us who the devil was behind all this in the first place.
Right.
It's one of the best stories. Oh, Tom, just Tom, says it's one of the best stories in all of Doctor Who. A repeat viewing for me every Halloween. I love the creepy atmosphere throughout and the land of fiction. There's untapped storytelling set within, so fingers crossed the Doctor returns to the place one day, possibly in the 60th. Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
That's Tom. This is Richard Smith again. He says, Jamie's second face is well played by Hamish Wilson, and I'm a bit disappointed when it's time for him to change back. I enjoyed this when I accepted it for what it is, a child's jaunt through classical literature. It's all rather fun, and the cast are giving it their all. David Rennie says the first episode is incredible. The rest is good fun, but not my cup of tea. Getting Jamie's faces wrong to explain Fraser Hines' illness for an episode was genius. It's Richard Smith again. He says...
You can't keep a good man down.
I guess not. He says, episode 1 is a whole lot of nothing, but it's done really well. After that, it's an entertaining runaround. Troughton seems to warm to a story that's a bit different from usual. He particularly enjoys his scenes with Bernard Horsfall. I got that sense too. No bases under siege or crazy space stories. And finally, we hear from Anthony Carroll, who says, great concept, fantastic ideas, let down by the Karkus.
Not a fan.
No. So we had one vote up for the Karkus and one vote down for the Karkus.
Yeah. I think it was a fairly even race there between the fans and the not so much fans. Well, thank you all so much for getting in touch and letting us know what you thought about those stories. And if you'd like to do that on a future episode, all the various ways and means are listed over our end credits. So before we say goodbye to Lee, we're going to do some recommendations.
Oh, lovely.
Okay, I've been recently reading The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Fay, which is a very old novel by the wonderful Michael Chabon.
Yes.
And I'm absolutely loving it. And I really wish I'd got round to this 20 years ago.
It is sitting on our bookshelf here at home.
Oh.
It's my perfect kind of novel, 600 pages. Every chapter reads like a self-contained short story, building up to something wonderful. It's just so good to read something this wonderful.
And if you're interested at all in the history of comic books in America, then this is the book for you. And Ian, you'll especially love this part at the very end where... Just kidding. But it is.
I frantically pulled my earplugs out there, so I didn't hear what you were going to say.
No, but seriously, it is also one of my favorite books in the whole world, and I think it is an absolute. I reserve the word genius, but this is a work of genius. It really is.
Yeah, it really is.
It ends up being about everything. In the end, it's about everything. It's just extraordinary.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, well, my recommendation is another literary one. It's the latest novel by Stephen King. It's called Holly. And if you are familiar with Stephen King's more recent works, he had a whole series of books featuring a detective called Bill Hodges, who was investigating some very supernatural goings-ons. Yeah, Mr. Mercedes. And Holly Gibney is a character that's introduced in that story, and she's kind of developed a life of her own, and now she has her own sort of front and centre adventure called Holly. And it's I found it quite engaging, and I was desperate to find out how it was all going to play out. It's quite, obviously Stephen King. It's quite gruesome in places, but if you're not averse to that, I think it's a really good read. Lee, what would you like to recommend?
Well, I had asked Mark earlier if it was in bad form for me to promote some of my own things. But
Hey, Lee, if you got it, flaunt it, my friend.
Yeah, there you go. Favorite line from the producers. Because I was genuinely baffled when I was invited to be on this show, because I have been listening and I know the quality of guests that you have on, and I honestly thought they must be confusing me with someone else. But my wife was talking me down, and she said they've probably heard of Relativity. And I said, that is possible, because that is, in certain circles, that is what I'm best known for. And it was, a multiple award-winning, Hugo-nominated outer space adventure radio drama serial. And it has run its course. It has come to its stunning conclusion. So you can now hear that in its entirety through your favorite podcatcher. And you can get all the links for that on its website at relativitypodcast.com.
And I should add a link to that on our show notes as well.
Thank you so much.
If you listen to Relativity, you may well hear some familiar voices if you check out Lee's other work.
Thank you. That's what I was going to say. How did you know that? Yes. My connection to Doctor Who is that Kyle Jones and I were both asked to be guests on the seminal Doctor Who Podshock many years ago, and we have remained friends in Doctor Who ever since. And so now Kyle is the brains behind Discussing Who. It used to be a weekly podcast, but we've gone completely off the rails. You know how that
You're
goes.
a bit more loosey-goosey now these days.
Well, yes, but we're trying to, when there's new Who to talk about, we'll be back, and that's coming up very soon as we record this.
Yes.
So pretty exciting. But yes, Discussing Who, part of the Discussing Network, and I encourage everybody to go hear Clarence Brown, Kyle Jones, and me try to be positive about everything that we experience in the Who universe.
Mm-hmm.
We've staked that out as our
It's a great
corner.
show.
Thank you so much.
No, I really do enjoy it. And I think the three of you can tell straight away that you're friends, and it's just...
I
it's
love
good.
those guys.
You feel like you're just sitting in the pub listening to a bunch of friends having a chat about the latest episode of Doctor Who. It's just a really, really nice listen.
Well, I've really enjoyed hanging with you guys, too. Here's to you.
Well,
I'm raising a glass.
The pleasure's been all ours.
Oh, thank you.
Lee, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great to have you as a guest.
Absolutely.
Join us next time when there will be an invasion. Ooh. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at mailbagofrassilon@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter @TimeEndSpacePod, and you can also find us on Facebook. If you want to leave some audio feedback, there is a link in the show notes. You can use your phone or your computer and leave up to 60 seconds of feedback, or if you're listening via the Anchor website, you can click on the message button and leave your audio. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you to Momo Tempo for providing our theme music.